Okay, so our directions are going to tell us to graph on the first 4 problems, and we're going to give you 4 different types of graphs. Oh, I checked this time. I was going to do red, but I caught myself. Now, when you're working on your homework tonight, in your spiral, all the work goes into the spiral. Graphing is going to go on the graph paper, and that's it, okay? So, first equation, or inequality, excuse me, we have y is greater than or equal to x plus 5. Well, look at that. How nice of them. They've already done work for us. They've already put the equation into slope-intercept form. So it's our job to just start picking stuff out. So when I graph, you're actually going to be graphing as if it was an equation. Because I don't know how to graph an inequality, but I know how to graph an equation. So I pick out the key pieces. What's the y-intercept? Y-intercept. That's the constant. And the slope is 1. But we're going to think about him as a fraction because I need a rise value and I need a run value. The one on top says you're going to rise up 1 and from there run to the right 1. And the directions I'm rising and running are dependent upon the signs. And my starting point will be that 5. All right, let's look at the inequality symbol. 2 things it tells me. What kind of line?
Solid.
I'm going to get a solid line, which means all the answers, all those ordered pairs on the line are part of my solution. Second thing, what half plane do I get to color? It says above for greater than. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and start my graph. And I always kind of cater my graph to the values I'm going to be graphing. So again, label x-axis x, y-axis y. I'm going to make tick marks only on blue lines of the graph paper. Oops, I'm going to have to redo those, sorry. Again, always labeling at least every other number so I know what your intervals are being counted by. Now, I go to where y equals 5, and I mark them in. And then I'm going to rise up 1 and to the right 1. And when we do that, we all get to the same point. We get to 1, 6. Now, I know he's solid because of the or equal to. Now, before I shade, I'm going to test. And I'm going to test, my strategy is always to test 0, 0. The only time I don't get to choose that strategy is if 0, 0 is on the boundary. So what I glean from this is if I get my statement is true, then I shade the direction that 0, 0 is. If I get my statement is false, that means I shade away and I don't cover up 0, 0. So I plug in 0 for y, 0 for x, and I get 0 is greater than or equal to 5. Is that true or false?
False.
False. So actually, let me do that in a different color. So because I get false, what that says is you better not shade 0, 0. So I'm not going to shade where 0, 0 is. I'm going to shade above, which is what I predicted I was going to get anyway in my original problem. Okay? All right, let's do the next one. What if we're told to graph, and when all of these are being graphed the same way on a coordinate system, so on 2 different axes, but there's only one variable. What kind of line do I get? And please don't say straight line. What kind of line do I get when it's just x and a number? That's my vertical line. So when I graph, I'm going to graph a vertical line at x equals -2. Okay? So let's look at the inequality. And what 2 things do I get from greater than? What kind of line?
On the right.
What kind of line?
Dash.
Okay, he's dashed. Now, because he's vertical, that breaks the traditional pattern of above and below. So I'm down to now right and left. So what direction would I shade with greater than with a vertical line?
Right.
Okay, so right would be the greater numbers. So I can already get my graph going over here. And I'm actually not going to put any numbers on my y-axis because I'm not going to graph anywhere on my y-axis. So I'm going to do a dashed line where y equals, or x equals -2. Now my guess is that I'm going to be graphing to the right. So I'm going to test, again, my favorite point, which is not on the boundary line, which is 0, 0. And is 0 greater than -2?
Yes.
Okay, and the answer is yes. So if it's true, what that says is when you shade, you better be covering over where 0, 0 is. And that's precisely what happens when I graph to the right. I just covered over the origin at 0, 0. Okay. All right, wouldn't be fair if we just did x as a number, so let's do our third example with y as a number. What kind of line do we get when all we have is a y? So when I graph this one, I get a horizontal line at y equals 4. Okay? So now we look at the inequality, and what two key things do I know about the line? It's dashed because of the less than, and what direction do I shade? Okay, less than says shade below. So again, real easy to set up my graph. This time I'm not going to make any marks on my x-axis. Label at least every other one. And I'm going to do a dashed line through y equals 4. And remember, it's a line, so I should see those arrow caps. So now I'm going to test my favorite point. He's not part of the boundary line, so I'm going to test my 0, 0. And I get 0 is less than 4. Is that true or false?
True.
That's true. So what that says is when you shade, you better be covering over where 0, 0 is, which is exactly what I get when I shade below. Last example of this kind. We've got the most amount of work to do. We have 2x minus y is greater than or equal to 4. So it's not in slope-intercept form. And again, I cannot do any interpretation until I get it into slope-intercept form. So what's the first step in getting it into slope-intercept form? Maddie?
Subtract 2x from both sides.
I'm going to subtract 2x from both sides. And remember, when I do that, the x term always comes in front to make it mirror slope-intercept form. Oh, you're welcome. And what else? I've got a -1. Uh-oh, guess what -1 tells me? We got a little flipping going on. I draw that arrow to remind myself, and I get y is less than or equal to 2x minus 4. So I'm actually going to be graphing as if it said y equals 2x minus 4. So let's identify our key pieces. What's the y-intercept?
-4.
And what's the slope?
2/1.
2, and again we write it as 2 over 1. Now let's look at the inequality once it's in that slope-intercept form. Less than or equal to. So what kind of line?
Solid.
So I'm going to get a solid line. And what about the shading? Less than tells me below. So let's see this one. I'm going to go down. So I'm going to make this graph match my values. Make sure that when they're going down or to the left, you're getting negatives. To the right and up is going to be positives. So on this one, I go to where y is -4, and then I rise up 2 and to the right 1. So everybody should be at the point 1, -2. And then we're told to do a solid line. And before I shade, I'm going to test. And again, 0, 0 is not on the boundary, so he's a good point to test. And let's see, and I always test back to original. 2 times 0 minus y, or sorry, minus 0 is greater than or equal to 4. Is 0 greater than or equal to 4? No, that's false. Oops, that didn't change, sorry. So what that says is you better not be shading where 0, 0 is. And again, below would take us away from 0, 0. Okay? All right, now I'm going to turn the tables, and we're going to give you the graph, and your job is to figure out what the inequality is. So the directions are going to say, write an inequality. Whose graph is shown? So this one you're going to kind of have to graph along with me. Actually, let's make him a little shorter. This part might need to be a little taller. Now, this is something you will not see in the book. What you will not see are the ordered pairs, clearly dotted out. What you're going to see is a red line on grids with black axes. Your job is to figure out where does that red line cross the intersection of blue lines, because that will be whole number ordered pair. Okay, so you're going to have to do some counting. So for us, we're at this point, which is what? 0, 1. The next point, what would he be? 2, 2. And the last one would be what? 4, 3. Okay? Now I'm going to draw my line in red. Okay. So here's what I do. I look at that line. I need 2 key pieces of information to write slope-intercept form. And then I need to get 2 more key pieces of information to figure out my inequality. So key piece number 1, where does it cross the y-axis? At 1. Now I'm not going to write it as an ordered pair because in the formula y equals mx plus b, it is not written as an ordered pair, it's written as just the x-intercept number. Okay. Now we have to do slope, and slope we actually calculate. So what we're going to do is we're going to go from 1 point and go up as high as I need to get to the second point, and then how much do I go over? So notice I went up. How far did I go up?
1.
And then how far did I move? And what direction did I move?
Right.
I moved right, which is positive. So my slope is 1/2. I rose 1 and rose up 1, and I ran to the right twice. Okay. Now I need to gather 2 more pieces of information. What kind of line do I have? Dashed. So dashed says you have one of 2 choices. It's either greater than or it's less than. Next. Oh, I forgot a key thing. Yeah. This kind of helps. I forgot this part. This is given to you, sorry. Okay. Now, key thing. Am I shaded above or below? So of those two inequalities, which one represents below?
Less than.
So I've got all the things I need for my inequality. Y is less than mx plus b. Y is less than 1/2 x plus 1. And that's it. Okay? One more. So we're graphing and labeling x and y axis. We're putting tick marks. Actually, I need to get one more. Okay. Next, you're going to see, or you're going to look for an intersection on the blue lines of the graph paper. I'm going to highlight 3 points for you. Okay, the bottom point is located where? -1 on the y-axis, so 0, -1. How about the second point, the one in the middle? What's his coordinates?
1, 2.
Not 1, 2. -1, +2. -1, +2. And where's the last one? -2, 5. Okay, so everybody should have that same guy. All right, then they get connected. And they get shaded. Okay, now our math detective work begins. Where does it cross the y-axis?
-1.
Next, we want to figure out slope. And remember what we're going to do. We're going to go rise to where the next point is, and then run over to meet him. So how far did I rise?
3.
I rose up 1, 2, 3. So 3, and I rose up, so he's positive. Now, run. I ran to the left 1, so I have a -1. So what I write for the slope is -3. Okay. Then I look at my my line. What kind of line do I have? All right. So solid says you have two choices. It's either greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to. Then the shading is going to tell me, is that shading above or below? So of those two inequalities, which one meets above? So now I have everything I need. Y, is greater than or equal to -3x, and I don't write plus -1, I just write -1. Okay, and that's it.